This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome to the February 2026 episode of RCV Clips, our podcast about all things ranked choice voting. I'm Chris Hughes, a member of the Resource Center staff. In today's episode, I'll be talking with Donnay, a mathematician and data scientist who studies election methods, about Rate a Queen, a twist used in RuPaul's Drag Race for the last few seasons to inject just a little more drama in the competition to find America's next drag superstar. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. I could not be more excited to talk about two of my favorite things, ranked choice voting and RuPaul's Drag Race.
It's the perfect content. Well, as I like to say on this podcast, I think we should start at the beginning. I'm hoping most of our listeners know what RuPaul's Drag Race is, but look, we can't guarantee that. So can you talk a bit about what RuPaul's Drag Race is and what Rate a Queen is?
Sure. So RuPaul's Drag Race is a reality competition show where drag queens compete to be America's next drag superstar. Each week, a panel of celebrity judges determines the top and bottom queens, and the bottom queens lip sync for their life, and the loser is sent home. But in some episodes, Rate a Queen forces the queens to rank each other instead of the judges. So then the rankings determine the top and bottom queens.
So Rate a Queen has actually been used a few times on the show, right?
Right. So it started in season 16, very first episode of the season. They were doing a talent show. And when the talent show was over, they asked the queens to rate each other. Came back again in season 17 for the opening talent show. But this time, the talent show is in the middle of the season, which is just going to totally revolutionize the way these queens interact with the rankings.
Yeah, I will get into it in a bit, but I do think, I've always found this twist kind of fun. One, because it's about rating and rankings, this is RCV Clips. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about this today. But I think it really, being in the middle of the season, really throws a new wrench into the twist, which is pretty exciting for me. Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing maybe we should talk a bit more about is like you said, in season 16 and 17, it was the first episode of the show, of the season, where the queens don't really know each other. They don't have pre-established relationships. They don't really even know what they're getting into yet. In season 16, it was a totally brand new twist. No one had ever been made to rank their fellow competitors before. And now we're in the third version of the twist. So they sort of have to keep reinventing it, right? It's sort of the classic reality competition show of use the same twist, but twist it in new ways.
Right. And I always believed that they introduced this twist, I mean, obviously for the drama, for the thrill of it all. And I feel like the first two times it happened, there wasn't a lot of this kind of backdoor alliance chit chat going on. And so it was really exciting as the viewer and just frankly more fun to watch it, where the queens were really thinking about the personal relationships they've built over a few weeks, rather than just some random people that maybe they want to be kind of respectful to.
Right, exactly. And that's, I think, this is a broader thing about the whole show, RuPaul's Drag Race, and also about a lot of reality competition shows, which is that over time, there's a game about the show that develops, right? And there's this whole meta strategy to how people approach it. In RuPaul's Drag Race, there's an All-Stars series where, people come back from previous seasons who placed really high or got eliminated too early, want to have a second chance. They have something to come back and fight for. And then they all know all their fellow competitors now, and that changes the dynamics, and that they have to vote on each other, not using rankings. So who knows how legitimate those elections are. But that changes the whole dynamic too. And it's cool to see that part of things, that interplay between All-Stars and original recipe Drag Race, that interaction that they're having. But now we're getting too into the how do you produce television side of this conversation.
I mean, I think the other thing that's really fun about the fact that this twist has stuck around for so long is that we as the viewers are now getting honestly very familiar with ranked choice voting, and with the idea that rankings somehow determine a winner, they determine a loser. And actually, I think what's very cool is in RuPaul, they show you the full ranking. So as a result of all of these rate a queen twists, at the end they tell you, here's how every single queen ranked overall. And so it's just exciting for me as a mathematician to see that there's like a real world example that, you know, millions of people are watching across the world using ranked choice voting, which in the election world is maybe still kind of like on the fringe or still coming into its own as like a primary system.
Yeah, I've said in the last couple of years we're like at the end of the beginning with ranked choice voting in the US. You know, that means it's like starting to enter into the mainstream. People are aware of it, at least, but they don't always know what it means. And I mean, that's partly why I wanted to do this episode too, because like you said, we finally actually do have the full ranking data from season 17 and the current season 18. And that allows us to determine how they've actually been counting these rankings. Because there are actually a lot of different ways to count ranked ballots. In the US, we typically use instant runoff voting or the single transferable vote method if it's a single winner or a proportional election, a multi-winner election. But they're actually using a totally different tabulation method here with these rankings that they're getting from the queen. So I'm curious, can you talk about how you took all this ranking data that we've gotten from the show, because they do actually publish it now, and how we figured out what it is they're doing to run these tabulations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, usually the first question I'm asked as a mathematician talking about ranked choice voting is, what is ranked choice voting? And ranked choice voting is this big umbrella term that refers to any system of election that uses ranked ballots as the input. So as you said, in the US, we normally use IRV, instant runoff voting, or STV, single transferable vote. And these are all, you can think about them as like rules or mechanisms or algorithms that convert ranked choice ballots into a winner and a loser. And when someone just says we're using ranked choice voting, to me, that leaves a big hole in the story. What kind of ranked choice voting are you using? And again, as you said, without the ranked choice ballots, you have no idea. There's no way to reconstruct the rule without knowing the ballots. And the first time I watched Rate a Queen, season 16, I just felt in my heart, I was like, are the producers doing something funny here? They're not telling us what system of election they're using. They're not showing us the data. Is there some finagling going on backstage where maybe, you know, they're just putting the queen they want at the top? But now, once we have the actual ballot data, like we do in season 17 and season 18, we can do like an election audit. So the way I did it was I put all of the ballot data into my favorite ranked choice voting software called VoteKit. I ran it through a bunch of different election mechanisms, and once I saw who won and who lost from the different mechanisms, I could match up the election mechanism with the actual outcome from the show. So, Chris, can I get a drum roll, please? So the actual election method they used is border count, or border election, or what would you call it, Chris? Just border?
I'd call it, yeah, the border count.
The border count.
Yeah.
And what was exciting about the border count results and how we feel really confident that this is the method they're using is that the results match up 1-to-1 with the published results. A lot of the other election methods like STV or Condorcet have the same top two, the same winners as Borda, but they differ along the full ranking of how they rank the other queens. But Borda matches up 1-to-1, and so we're pretty confident that this is exactly what they're using.
Mm-hmm. And so to pull back a little bit, they actually have published, we were talking about how they published the ranking data, but they've also shown like this queen was in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And we have that full set of queen, like final results, total like order of the queens for season 17 and season 18. And so that's like how we can actually take the ranking data we got and confirm the actual tabulation method, that Borda count that got used. Can you talk a bit about how Borda works? Like, what do the rankings mean in a Borda election?
Yeah. So a Borda election is essentially just a point system based on rankings. So ahead of time, the people administering the election say the person ranked in first place is going to get this many points. The person ranked in second place is going to get this many points, and so on. Then you just add up all the points, and whoever has the highest points win. The classic Borda score is that you give, let's say in the example of RuPaul's Drag Race, there's 6 candidates. You give 6 points to first place, 5 points to second place, so on, giving 1 point to last place. But you don't have to use that choice of score. You can give other scores to different positions, but that's kind of the classical one that we see most often.
And that's what we know that Drag Race has used here.
That is what we know, but we were excitingly able to check whether or not any other set of points would have caused somebody else to win. But we can dive into that a little bit later.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So just to like illustrate it for listeners too with Borda, say there's 4 people running and 4 people voting. If everybody ranks the same person at the top and the top ranking is worth 4 points, those 4 people ranking that candidate first 4 times in a row gets them 16 points, right? Because it's 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You could also think about this in terms of the Olympics, another thing in the zeitgeist right now. You could look at the medal count and you could say, okay, Norway has 22 gold medals, 14 bronze, 7 silver. The US has some other combination of medals. How do I know which country's doing better? Okay, well, if I use a board account, maybe I assign 3 points to gold, 2 points to silver, 1 point to bronze. And then I could add up those scores and see which country's doing better. But maybe I actually think that gold medals are the only thing that matter at the Olympics. So I choose the score 1 point for gold, 0 points for silver, 0 points for bronze. Yeah. And there's all these different choices we can make about how we kind of value your position in the ranking. And that impacts how the countries perform overall.
Yeah, and that's like the sorts of values that those different point values are supposed to represent is why there's all these different flavors of Borda out there, essentially, right?
Right. You get to decide, what do you prioritize in an election? Do you really care about first place votes? Do you really care about second place votes? Or do you just care that the person was mentioned at all? And that's an important feature. And that's something you get to decide.
Yeah. It's an honor just to be nominated, you know?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people don't realize just exactly how many choices go into, running an election like this. We've already said Borda is a kind of ranked choice voting. And now we're saying, well, there's all these different flavors of Borda. So along the way, we're just making all these choices. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. For what it's worth, Borda, I don't believe is used in any public elections. At least I know it's not used anywhere in the US.
Not that I'm aware of either. I know a lot of academics who use it to try to do things like rank people applying for jobs or rank people who are going up for tenure. But yeah, I don't know any real world use cases.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine was texting me because he is a high school teacher and also coaches the swim team at his high school. And he's trying to get his swimmers to pick their team captains for next year. And he was like, hey, could I use ranked choice voting in this election? I was like, well, you don't have a ton of voters. Your like ratio of candidates to voters is pretty small. And so you shouldn't use single winner RCV because you might wind up with a lot of ties because of the way votes get counted. But you might want to consider Borda because that way, like, intensity of preference is like measured through points and you won't wind up with a bunch of ties. You won't need to worry about that part because it's a small election. So if you're trying to use a ranked ballot and you only have so many voters or so many choices to pick from, maybe consider Borda count. It might work a little better in like a small group setting.
That's really funny that you bring up the small group setting. My friend group and I were trying to decide where we should go on vacation. And because I'm in the friend group, I said, we got to do it by ranked choice voting. We gotta. And we started just by collecting ranked ballots. And then I had a very fun time, again, piping it through all the different election methods I could find. And I found the exact same thing you're talking about, that a lot of other election methods like single transferable vote just kind of break down when there's a very small number of voters, just because all these weird edge cases start to happen. So Borda is a really good choice when you just don't have that many people participating.
All right. Well, now that we've really taught the people what Borda count is, let's talk actually about what our results are. Can you run through the results from season 18 of Rate a Queen.
Absolutely. So there's 2 nights of the talent show in season 18 and the Rate a Queen twist. And on night 1, we get this ranking. First, Juicy Love Dion. Second, Mia Starr. Third, Nene Coco. Fourth, Darlene Mitchell. Fifth, Vita Von Teese Starr. And sixth, Sierra Mist. On night 2, we get in first place Jane Don't. Then in second, Athena Dion. Then Kenya Pleaser, Discord Adams, and Mikey Meeks in last place. And so let's do one little illustration of, say, how we find that Juicy Love Dion is ranked first overall in night 1. So we're given the ballot data the day after the talent show. All the queens gather around the table and see how they voted for each other. And all of the queens who could vote put Juicy Love Dion in first place, except for Kenya Pleaser, who put her in second. So Juicy's getting almost the maximum amount of border points possible. She's getting 29 out of a possible 30. 6 from all the queens who put her first, and then 5 from Kenya, who put her second. On the other hand, Sierra Mist, who came in last on night 1, was ranked 4th by Mikey, 5th by Kenya, and 6th by everybody else. So she only gets 8 out of a possible 30 points. And the next lowest queen on night 1, Vita, gets 14 out of 30. So Sierra really was ranked a lot lower than all of the other queens. She was pretty consistently the bottom choice.
Yeah, very clearly. There's part of me that feels genuinely like a little bad for how like harshly the fellow queens rated her, but I guess it is a competition and somebody has to lose.
It is a competition, and you know, sometimes the queens just don't they decide they want to make a stand, and that's great, but they might not be serving what everybody wants to eat for dinner.
Yeah.
So in addition to running this ballot data through all of the possible election methods, I was also curious that even if the producers had said outright, we're using board account, don't worry, you know exactly how your votes are going to be tallied, that maybe they would choose a weird score vector to ensure that the queens they wanted to win did. So the standard board a score vector of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that gives you the exact same results as the producers. So it seems like they totally used standard Borda. But if you try all the other possible score vectors, you actually can't change the outcome at all on night 1. The night 1 results are stable. Any choice of reasonable score vector gives you the exact same ranking. But on night 2, you can do one little tricky thing. You can choose a score vector such that Discord and Mikey Meeks are tied for last place. If listeners are curious, you could try giving 3 points to first place, 2 points to second and third, and 1 point to fourth and fifth. And if you add up some scores, you'll find that Discord and Mikey tie. But there's actually no way to make Discord lose and make Mikey come second to last. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately for Mikey, no matter what you're going to do, they're going to end up in the bottom on night 2.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. And like, it makes me wonder if any of the producers are listening to this, reach out to Chris if you want someone to consult with you on your like twist design, obviously. And 2, make sure you have a tie-breaking procedure. Maybe consider a lip sync, because that is the way decisions get made in this television program, which is drag queens lip syncing at each other and to the audience.
Absolutely. And Chris, maybe you know this more than I do, but as a programmer, as a coder, I have to handle these tie-break things all the time.
Yeah.
But I actually don't know that many real-world elections where tie breaks happen. How often do ties happen in real-world ranked choice elections?
In RCV elections, there's been pretty few. Before 2024, there had only been one tie that I'm aware of in the 700 ranked choice voting elections that have been held in the U.S. in the last 20 years. That was in Portland, Maine's mayoral election. I don't remember. I think it was 2022. It might have been 2023. Chris, with a quick fact check of myself on this one, we double checked, and it was an election in Portland, Maine. It was not a mayoral election. It was the city's at-large council seat election in 2021. So at least I got the city right the first time out. Candidates were literally tied at the end of like 4 rounds of tabulation, and they had to draw names out of a hat to break the tie, because that's the standard tie-breaking procedure in the US, is some kind of lot randomized system. And other than that, we saw a couple ties in early rounds of like people who were in last place in early rounds of ranked choice voting counting in Portland, Oregon, actually. And the Multnomah County folks who were running the election there had like a detailed tie-breaking procedure for how to break those ties efficiently, because they also had to break them randomly by lot. They essentially drew cards from a deck drew a card from a deck of cards, and that randomly decided how those ties would get broken. And like that's, I mean, that it's not come up a lot, but it's come up just enough times. The thing you also tend to see is in very small elections in the US, RCV or not, that's where you're more likely going to run into a tie. Like the fewer votes cast, the more likely it is you're going to have the same number of votes for any number of candidates at the end of the election. So my colleagues who have like actually run elections, you know, at the city or county level said they were always worried about low turnout, small elections because they were going to have a tie somewhere in there.
Do you happen to know, I'm just curious, what would happen if like there was a tie in the presidential election? Is that the Supreme Court? Is that Congress? Is that everybody in America flips a coin? Like what?
This is a great question. I believe if it's a tie in the Electoral College, it goes to the House. If it's a tie in a given state, that I'm not sure of.
Cool.
Okay, so getting back to the topic of this episode, how these things got counted, how it impacted how people are behaving. What we've shown here is that the producers of the show did actually take the Queen's rankings, tabulated them fairly using a consistent method. We know that they followed a clear set of rules and told the Queens, here's what happened because of the decisions you all made. I would say that's like a fair process. It was transparent. It was open. They told us what was going on. Now we know all the details about what was going on. But, you know, sometimes we frequently see the Queens on this show complaining that somehow the process wasn't fair, that they feel slighted by the results. I think it's probably more the case that maybe they feel like they got treated unfairly because of the way the other queens voted, because of the strategy those queens brought into like the proverbial voting booth. Do you think that's like a fair characterization here?
Yeah, I think what helps me think about fairness is thinking about who is saying it's fair or unfair and against like what are you measuring that? So in this particular scenario, the queens are ostensibly asked to rank each other in terms of their performance in the talent show. But very clearly, especially in season 18, they are ranking them according to a whole different set of conditions. And so I think queens start to think things are unfair when they feel like they're supposed to be judged based on how well they did a backflip into a split. But what they end up being like ranked by is a kind of like strategic goal of getting them in the bottom, getting them in the top, something like that. So yeah, when I think about fairness and strategy, I think about, are people actually ranking each other based on the talent show or not? Because they're supposed to be doing it based on the talent show, but it doesn't always play out that way.
Yeah, I mean, my take, honestly, based on the results and the ranking orders that we actually saw, is like night one felt more based on the talent. I wouldn't say 100%. Like people still were making some choices based on alliances and relationships, but seems, especially given how stable it is and like the analysis you ran, seems pretty like a clear set of like winners and losers based on how people actually took in their talent. But night two feels a little bit more like there was more happening in how people were making their decisions.
Yeah. In night two, I pulled this great quote that I just think puts it really well. Sierra, who was in the bottom in night one, is trying to figure out who can I get into the bottom of night two that I'll beat in a lip sync. So Sierra's out here campaigning, trying to be very strategic. And Sierra says, I'm going to put Discord in last place instead of Jane Don't, because there's no point putting a top performer at the very bottom, because then I would have to lip sync against them, and that's silly. Amazing. It is silly. Why would you want to do that? But by doing that, you're not necessarily kind of truly expressing your preference about the queens. You're expressing your preference about who you want to lip sync against as the loser. And so I don't think what Sierra did was unfair by any means. I think it's totally within the realm of the competition, and it's even within the realm of Borda. Sierra's just gunning for a particular outcome, understands the voting mechanism, and knows how her choices are going to impact the final outcome.
Yeah, like just made a savvy decision in how she used her rankings.
Right. And I think we see this all the time in, like, I think how people talk about the primary voting system in the US. You see people say things like, well, I don't know if I want to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary because I don't think Bernie Sanders will win the general election. Even if Bernie is their favorite candidate, maybe they rank somebody else or they vote for somebody else in the primary. And I think that's another form of strategic voting. You're saying, well, I'm suppressing my real preference because I think this other preference will work out better in the end. And the queens here are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this is like a specific thing you can get away with in Borda that's harder to get away with in other ranked methods because everyone's getting points based on those rankings. It really 100% is to your advantage to like bury, rank lower, maybe even artificially lower someone you really don't like, someone who you would prefer to lose because they'll get fewer points and that will impact the results of the outcome of that election. So with all of this new knowledge we have of how these votes are getting counted, do you think there's any advice you would give to queens on future seasons of the show about how to most effectively use their rankings to get the outcomes they want?
We saw this happen in Portland, Oregon in their recent switch to ranked choice voting, but a lot of the candidates in Portland talked about how it totally changed the way they campaigned and that a lot of the campaigning had to focus on, maybe I'm not going to be somebody's first choice, but I really want to be somebody's second and third choice. And we see a totally similar kind of campaign strategy work out in season 18. A lot of the girls say, well, like, I'm going to put you in my top 2 or my top 3. And those queens, even if they had some low votes, those 1 or 2 high votes really saved them. Let's take the example of Kenya Pleaser. Kenya had one alliance with Mia, and maybe Kenya didn't perform the greatest in the talent show. Maybe her flag flipping didn't excite people. But Mia ranked Kenya first because they had an alliance and she said she would. And you can look at the scores and see that the 5-point boost that Kenya took from that took her to third place overall. So even though she performed really badly, a lot of other people ranked her low, one high ranking saved her. It didn't make her win, but it certainly saved her from the bottom. And then on the flip side, the people who you see do really well, like Juicy, are people who perform really well with everybody. They're either first or they're second with lots of people. And so you have 2 strategies. If you want to win, you need to figure out a way to have everybody rank you at least first, second, or third. But if you don't want to lose, maybe all you need to do is get 1 or 2 really high votes, and then that lifts you up from totally losing the lip sync.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's interesting to draw this parallel to public elections like you were talking about in Portland or like we've seen in New York City. The first bit of advice of like get as many first choices as you can and get some second and thirds too is like absolutely the optimal strategy in single winner RCV. And Borda has this additional level of like if you get at least 1 first choice, you'll get saved from being totally in last place. And that's not quite the same in single winner RCV because you're still going to get eliminated somewhere along the way in those rounds of counting that just aren't happening in Borda. And that's like interesting just again because of the design of the system. It changes what makes sense to how you campaign and how you're asking for those votes and how far that might get you at the end of the day.
Right. It really illustrates that Borda prioritizes different things than STV does in terms of what candidates should do well, have completely different properties between these 2 different election systems.
Well, that's all the questions I had. Do you have any final thoughts? Any last words of wisdom?
I guess my final thoughts are, I hope that what Rate a Queen does for the viewers of RuPaul's Drag Race and what it does for us more broadly is that it reminds people that there's all sorts of choices involved in elections. And we take a lot of those choices for granted. We're so used to plurality voting, whoever gets the most votes wins, but there's this whole beautiful tapestry of other election methods. And even when you choose an election method, there's a whole bunch of rules you have to decide along the way to enact that election method. So I guess what I really hope people take away is that this is just a different way of choosing a winner. and that if you don't like this way, you should do some research and find out about all the other ways there are to determine a winner, and you can go out and advocate for your favorite system of election along the way.
Consider starting your own podcast about it called Borda Clips or Condorcet Clips, you know?
I also have to say, I really do hope that in future seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, they change the twist name from Rate a Queen to Rank a Queen. I just think it's a missed opportunity there, and the producers do not have to give me a byline credit for it. They can just take it.
Well, it is interesting because, like, you are after a fashion, you are giving people scores. So, like, Rate a Queen actually kind of makes sense to communicate some of what's happening. But for our purposes, obviously, I agree.
Very fair.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Donnay, for getting on and walking us through this research. I genuinely am so pleased to actually know how these votes are getting counted, and I hope some of our listeners are too.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. I was nerding out all weekend doing this. I had a great time, and I'm thrilled that I could tell you about it.
I love it. All right. Well, talk to you soon, and hopefully we'll be able to keep talking about this maybe next season. Maybe they change the tabulation method, you know? Who knows? We'll have to keep an eye on things.
We'll find out.
All right. Thanks again. And now for this month's final round, where we share an interesting bit of trivia, a useful tidbit, or just something we thought was cool for folks to know about ranked choice voting. Here's Dave O'Brien with this month's final round.
Did you know that a variant of the board account known as the Dowdle system is used to elect the Parliament of Nauru? A small island nation in the South Pacific, Nauru has used the Dowdle system since 1971. This ranked ballot regionalism makes it this month's final round.
Thank you for joining us today for the February 2026 episode of RCV Clips produced by the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Make sure to subscribe to the show for the latest episodes and updates. Please take a minute to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform too. For more information about RCVRC and Ranked Choice Voting, check out our website, www.rcvresources.org. The production of this podcast is supported by the generosity of our donors. Donations can be made directly on the website. And please don't hesitate to contact us with any questions at donate@rcvresources.org. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RCV Resources, and on Facebook and LinkedIn at Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at RCVRC. Our theme music is Flutterbee by Poddington Bear. Until next time, I'm Chris Hughes on behalf of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center.